Have you ever had a Tinder date when your match in real life looked completely different from the photos in the app, and how did those dates end? 2 times, yes. In the first instance, she was much better looking than her photos inferred, and we had a great dinner experience followed by dancing at a casino's convention center. No spark in either of us, and we agreed that we would be socially involved with each other until someone or something happened to one or both of us. In the other instance, there were a few significant red flags beyond the non-match to their photos. They brought 3 friends with them, were 3/4 drunk by the time I was 10 minutes early to the date. They used Coke twice during the date and took half of my cheese fries. I could cope with a Coke fiend catfish, although someone stealing my cheese fries is due for a rough time. There was only one time where I met a man who was quite obviously a totally different person than the person in the photo, same race and gender, but his face shape, build, height, skin color, eye color, etc. were all totally different. I wouldn't even have known it was him if he hadn't walked up to me and said hi. Short condition. I'm name. I outright told him you're not the same person as in your photo, have a nice night, and walked out. I've also had a handful of occasions in which the guy was clearly using old photos because they were heavier, had less hair, had more wrinkles, etc. than in the photos. Those guys were all really insecure, and it expressed itself in bad behavior, so there was max 3 dates before I said I didn't think this would work. I actually had a long-term relationship with a guy who looked worse in his photos than he did in person. He used bad camera angles in his photos, but on top of that he'd grown a beard, which he looked better with, was better dressed, and looked like he'd lost a little weight, although that might have been due to the lack of bad camera angles or the more flattering clothing. When I met him, the relationship ended under poor circumstances, but the first date was amazing. A few times. One, the picture was obviously 10 years old, but I still met up with him because he looked like the kind of guy I would have been crazy about back when the photo was taken. He aged and put in a bit of weight but was still cute. Was just a one-night thing, but we talked about meeting up again. Other time was a catfish that I noticed before I left to meet him. He deleted his photos and I asked him to send me one. Now I'd actually already taken a screenshot of his profile before he deleted the pics, and when he sent me a picture it didn't match and I pulled him up on it. He then did the whole looks don't matter, don't be shallow. Fuck off. Another was clever with his angles. He had the biggest nose I've ever seen and pursed belly. I chatted to him anyway as he traveled an hour to meet me, but when he asked to kiss me I said nope, you don't look like your photos. Awkward, but I wasn't going there. Not Tinder, but nearly a decade ago on OkCupid. Homegirl was considerably heavier and looked pretty different from her photo. The photo she used on the dating site was certainly her, but obviously had been shopped or altered a bit to make her look different. She had driven over an hour away across state lines, and I wasn't about to send her home, so I decided to say fuck it and continue with the date anyway. She talked a lot and I couldn't really get much of a word in. At one point I excused myself to go to the bathroom, stopped at the bar and ordered a shot and about my 6th beer and came back to the table. She wasn't awful, and kept flattering how I looked, just a terrible storyteller and bad at conversation. I'm somewhat of a lightweight and felt hammered after drinking that much over about 2 hours just straight listening to her talk. I suggested we go for a walk. We stopped at a bench and she asked me if I wanted to make out. She really wasn't unattractive, just different than I had anticipated, and I was still pretty drunk, so I just said yes. She was a great kisser, and placed my hand on her boob. She did have outstanding boobs. After about 15 minutes of this, she asked if I wanted to go continue in the back of her minivan. She ended up going down on me, and suggested we have sex. I said yes. Again, she was wonderfully skilled and enthusiastic at both. Afterward she dropped me off at home, and left me with a copy of a DVD she had insisted I watch. We never got in contact with each other again. Twist, about 8 years later, we matched again on a different dating site. She jokingly started ribbing me about the DVD I had stolen from her. We both had a laugh recalling the very drunken one-night stand from years prior, and she let me keep the movie. We then never contacted each other again. It went from being disappointed that someone didn't look like I thought they were going to surprisingly having outstanding sex with her in the back of a minivan a few hours later, to a good story to tell on Reddit many years later. All in all, not bad. Not Tinder. The picture he sent wasn't a better, younger, or fitter version of his current self, it was a different man entirely. We met at a crowded diner during the, thank God, noisy breakfast rush, and I never got a word in. He repeatedly whooped and pumped his fist in the air, shouting that he had hit the jackpot, then started describing which parts of each of us would be inside / wrapped around / underneath which parts of the other. He was creative? I suppose I should have been flattered, but this little catfisher was just a titch over 5 feet tall, nearly bald, and maybe 25 years old. Even his first name was not what he first shared. How long did this tall, beautiful, grown-ass woman, who drove 40 minutes to meet a 6 feet 4 inches, mid-40s Grizzly Adams-looking physician, sit around and listen to this little dreamer's mating calls? However long it took to finish a cup of tea. He followed me out to my car and asked repeatedly, could we just drive around the block? So he could give me an orgasm from the side, whatever the F that means. When I sensed he was about to stop talking and take a breath, I interjected something about our surprise age difference, and that I wasn't the right woman for him. I could still hear him shouting as I drove off. He messaged over the next few weeks. I deleted without reading. Hope someone else enjoyed the side orgasm I forewent. I did a few times, but one stuck out to me. He was a sweet guy. We spoke on the phone for a few months before actually meeting. His picture on his Tinder profile had teeth and hair. When he showed up, he didn't have either of those things. I'm not a shithead, so I went through the date. Paid for my own meal and asked him if he wanted to watch a movie. We decided the bed was more comfortable and started watching a movie. 20 minutes into the movie, he asked to use my toilet. I had 2 bathrooms. He decided to unleash a hellish shit session in my bathroom connected to my bedroom. He came out 10 minutes later and left the door open. The smell was unbearable. I'm too nice and continued watching the movie like nothing was wrong. He left, and I blocked him across the board. He faked accounts and tried to reach out to me, but I declined to speak to him. I might be an asshole, but fuck that dude. That was the last time I invested months to a person unless I had face-to-face interaction first. Matched with a profile of a girl who said she was trans. No biggie, I'm bisexual and have been with trans women in the past anyways. Her profile pictures were in feminine makeup, girl clothes, not 100% passing but still clearly feminine presenting. But when I showed up to the date, just at like Jamba Juice, I want to be really careful with how I phrase my words here. She looked literally like a man. Like nothing like the pictures at all. She hadn't shaved in a few days and literally had more facial hair than the men in my family. She was wearing male clothes, absolutely zero makeup. Literally looked like a guy with long hair. The mistake was during the meetup me inviting her to my house instead of just making up an excuse to go home ASAP. Needless to say, there wasn't a second date. The most mind-blowing thing about this whole thing was her talking to me about how frustrated she was with finding dates. In her words, I went on a date with another trans lesbian, and after the date she told me straight up that she didn't find me feminine enough, and that really hurt. And it's like, girlie, I'm sorry. It's not that we're being transphobic, it's that you're literally catfishing people on your Tinder.